Grace is a mistress for love. Every day, she hooks up with an old man and goes to a hotel to have a good time. The more I try to dissuade her, the more energetic she becomes. She directly says that she has lived half of her life and finally found true love. She is firmly unwilling to break up. Just a few days later, she told me with a look of joy on her face, "Sonny, I'm pregnant. Now, Leo will definitely divorce and marry me." I was greatly shocked. Grace is in her 50s. Not to mention the hardships of pregnancy. Giving birth at her age is very likely to cost her life.
I earnestly advised her to get rid of the child as soon as possible. But I didn't expect that Grace thought I wanted to sabotage her second marriage. She cried and made a scene and incited her son to divorce me. I pleaded bitterly, but I was still driven out of the house by her. Later, I was stabbed to death by the wife of Grace's lover who mistook me for a mistress hooking up with her husband. And my husband not only didn't avenge me but also took Grace back to his hometown overnight. When I woke up again, I heard Grace say that she was pregnant again. 01, Sunny, I'm pregnant. Now, Leo will definitely divorce and marry me. Leo has been looking forward to having a son for decades.
That old woman in his family who can't give birth to a son definitely can't compete with me. I covered my head and squatted on the ground.
It took me a long time to sort out my thoughts from the dizziness.
Looking at Grace's face flushed with excitement, I tried my best to restrain my trembling body and forced a smile at her perfunctorily. "Congratulations on finally getting what you want. Having a Grace like this who is a mistress for love, I am really extremely unlucky." Just like in my previous life, Grace moved to the city from her hometown under the pretext of taking care of my child. But she didn't look after the child for a single day after she came. Instead, she ran out all day long. She said she was going to dance in the square. But I know that she is actually having an affair with Leo, a neighbor in the community. My father-in-law has passed away for many years. Both my husband Kay and I don't object to Grace finding someone again. But the prerequisite is that the other person is unmarried, right? Grace was caught having an affair with a married man. She repeatedly told me not to tell Kay. In my previous life, I did as she said. But the result was being stabbed to death as a mistress. The ending is obviously tragic. So this time, I plan to take the initiative. While Grace is still outside and hasn't come back, after I send my daughter back to my parents' home, I put the photos I took on my phone in front of Kay. "Look, your mom has found you a stepfather." Kay was first confused. After seeing Leo's face, confusion turned into astonishment. He said in surprise, "I remember Uncle Lee has a wife, right?" "Sonny, this joke can't be made."
Joke? I snorted coldly. Your mom and Leo are still in the hotel at this moment. Do you want to call his wife to catch them in the act? 02.
Grace is also very capable. She and Leo add up to over 100 years old. The number of times they have sex in a hotel is more frequent than that of me and Kay. After I showed Kay the payment record of Grace booking a room that I secretly took pictures of, Kay was in a very bad mood. He sat on the sofa with a gloomy face and it took him a long time to squeeze out a sentence. "How long has it been?" I counted on my fingers. From the day I saw the two of them together until now, it must be at least 3 months. 3 months? Kay raised his voice and questioned me. "Since you already knew, why didn't you persuade her?" Persuade? I shook my head repeatedly. "When I just found out, I persuaded her. But your mom said that she is true love with Leo. She has lived half of her life and finally found true love. She is absolutely impossible to break up." The more I persuade, the more energetic the old lady becomes. When going out to have a good time, she doesn't forget to threaten me, saying that if I tell this matter, she will ask her son to divorce me. After the threat, she starts to play the victim again, saying that her marriage with my father-in-law was an arranged marriage and there was no happiness at all. She also said that we are all women and asked me to understand her hardships. I must have had my head kicked by a donkey in my previous life to agree to such a heartless request. Now, I have exposed her affair. As for the purpose, of course, it is to watch the mother-son battle. 03 After Kay squatted on the balcony and smoked half a pack of cigarettes, Grace hummed a tune and opened the door. She was still changing shoes when Kay directly rushed up and took away her bag. After the shoulder bag was opened, several condoms were placed inside, very conspicuous. Kay looked at Grace coldly and questioned, "What did you do?" His overly serious attitude instantly made the atmosphere in the room freeze.
Grace stood still, frantically thinking about something in her mind.
After a moment, she pointed at me. "It's none of my business. Sonny asked me to help bring it." She said there were no tools at home and asked me to help bring some back. At a critical moment, Grace's ability to shift the blame still functioned stably.
Unfortunately, Kay already knows the truth. He threw Grace's shoulder bag away and said resentfully, "Dad left early. You said you were lonely and wanted to find a companion. I have always supported you. But why did you have to fall in love with a married man?" Kay didn't show any mercy when speaking. Grace instantly became angry. "Kay, Leo and I are in a free love. Don't use futile thoughts to break us up."
I can see clearly from the side. Grace doesn't think she did anything wrong at all. She talked plausibly, and it was all nonsense about love being innocent. In my opinion, those who interfere in other people's marriages are all shameless mistresses,
using the guise of love to defend themselves as innocent. Do they really think that this way they are not immoral? Grace is determined not to break up, which makes Kay almost crazy. The two were still deadlocked. I walked up to Grace with chicken soup in my hand and softly persuaded, "Mom, don't be angry anymore. You can't be angry now. Drink some chicken soup to nourish your body." The fishy smell of chicken soup spread, and Grace's face suddenly changed. She covered her mouth and rushed to the toilet and vomited wildly. Kay is not a novice who has never experienced his wife giving birth. On the contrary, after I gave birth, he is very familiar with the process of a woman's pregnancy. When Grace came out of the bathroom, his face had already turned as black as ink. He gritted his teeth and said word by word, "Come with me to the hospital and abort the child." Grace was greatly shocked when she heard this. She hid behind me, trembling and wanting to call Leo. "No, I won't go. This baby I'm carrying is very likely to be a son. Leo has been looking forward to a son for decades. He said that when the child is born, he will divorce the one at home and then marry me." Kay frowned tightly, unable to believe what he had heard. He snatched Grace's cell phone in a fit of anger and threw it on the ground. "Do you know how old you are this year? A person in her 50s still wants to have a child. Do you know how great the risk is? Pregnancy for an elderly pregnant woman is not only the danger of childbirth itself. There is also the possibility of various hidden complications. In particular, Grace also has high blood pressure. If you are not careful, you will lose your life." Kay tried to persuade her painstakingly. When Grace was forced into a hurry, she simply sat on the ground and started wailing. "I have worked hard all my life, and in the end I have raised such an ungrateful son like you. The one in my belly is your own younger brother. Are you so eager to kill him?" Kay still wanted to say something, but suddenly Grace covered her stomach and started shouting in pain. I think she is pretending. But when I looked down, I saw cold sweat oozing from her temples. Half an hour later, the doctor pulled me and Kay out of the ward and scolded us harshly. "I'm not saying, is this how you two, as children, behave? The old lady is simply not suitable for giving birth at this age. Make a decision as soon as possible." The doctor somewhat overestimated my and Kay's abilities. With Grace's stubborn temper like a donkey, who can be the master of her? After the doctor left, Kay impatiently touched his head. Then he turned his gaze to me and said, "Sonny, there are some things that I, as a son, can't say easily. You are her daughter-in-law and a woman. Why don't you try to persuade her again? Let me persuade. If even a son can say something, and I, as a daughter-in-law, say it, Grace will definitely hate me to death." Thinking of being killed as a mistress in my previous life, I can't wait to strangle that old woman immediately. But I have a rare chance of rebirth and I must not die with her. So I agreed on the surface. When Kay went to pay the fees on the first floor, I made a call from the landline at the nurse's station. Hello, is Leo there? The person who answered the phone was a woman. Her voice didn't sound young. She asked me, "Who are you?" Leo's two daughters are both in other places. Only the two of them live at home permanently. Without having to ask again, I already knew the woman's identity, Leo's wife Ivy. Oh, sorry, I dialed the wrong number. I pretended to be panicked and hung up the phone. Before Kay went upstairs, I returned to the ward. Grace was lying on the bed receiving an infusion. When she saw me enter, she snorted coldly, "Don't even think about asking me to abort the child. You don't have this right. Grace is only 3 months pregnant. Before the baby's body is fully developed, she keeps talking about it being a son all day long. She also delusionally wants to marry Leo with her belly. As a daughter-in-law, I naturally have to fulfill the wish of this old lady." Thinking of this, I leaned close to Grace's ear and said a few words. Hearing this, Grace's gaze at me softened a little. "Don't worry. After I successfully marry into Leo's family, I will definitely ask Kate to treat you well. She loves acting, so I climbed up the pole." "Mom, I don't like to hear what you say. I am your daughter-in-law and naturally I will stand by your side." When Kay returned after paying the hospitalization fees, the atmosphere between me and Grace became extremely good. He thought I had persuaded Grace and he relaxed completely. "Sunny, you are really amazing. You can persuade my mom to change her mind." Grace and I looked at each other and tacitly did not refute. The ward returned to calm. Kay took an apple and was peeling it for Grace. It was completely a picture of a loving mother and a filial son. And I turned sideways and turned my gaze outside the glass window. Grace's ward is not far from the nurse's station, so I can easily catch a glimpse of a slender woman's figure. She pulled down the brim of her hat and approached. Pointing to the landline phone, she asked, "Hello, nurse. I want to ask if someone made a call on this landline half an hour ago." The nurse frowned. "People are coming and going here, and they are all making calls. I can't remember. What's the matter with you?" Ivy was extremely eager but had to restrain her emotions. "It's like this. A distant relative came to the city to see a doctor and called me on your landline. But she didn't make it clear which room she was in. So I want to find out which room she is in." The nurses were extremely busy and didn't have time to look up the phone number for her. Ivy still wanted to do it herself, but was politely stopped by the head nurse. "Madam, the hospital needs to protect the privacy of patients. If you want to find someone, it's better to wait until you contact that relative again." Afraid that Ivy couldn't find the place, I held the kettle and said that I would go get some hot water to wipe Grace's sweat. Our family and Leo's family are not far apart. We are all neighbors. Ivy and I are not very familiar, but we have talked a few times. As I passed by the nurse's station and headed to the hot water room, I deliberately didn't look in Ivy's direction. But I know that she must have seen me. Ivy was a teacher before retirement and is most particular about dignity. She doesn't like dancing in an affectionate way with others, so most of the time she stays at home. Leo is completely different from her. He loves to dance in the small square, and his dance partners have changed in batches. The most recent one is just my Grace. Ivy cried and made a fuss, but it was of no use. After that, she became sensitive and extreme. The couple quarreled every day, making their daughter dislike coming home. Seeing me appear, the tightly stretched string in Ivy's mind suddenly broke. She is not stupid. It's easy to think of my Grace. So she put on a mask and approached the door of the ward I had just come out of. After confirming that my Grace was in the hospital, she clenched her phone and called Leo, saying through gritted teeth, "Leo, when I went out today, I heard that Grace was hospitalized. We are all neighbors. Should we go and see her?" Even without hearing the content of the call, I also know that Leo will not agree to Ivy. He has a guilty conscience. Coming with his wife will definitely cause problems, but he will definitely come to the hospital secretly. Ivy just wanted to test the two of them. So after hanging up the phone, she put on her mask again and hid herself on a chair at the corner of the hospital. Half an hour later, Leo came looking for her anxiously. Grace's phone was broken, and he didn't know the specific room number, so he chose to look room by room. I seized the opportunity to pull Kay up and asked him to go downstairs and buy a wheelchair. He was still very puzzled. But I said that Grace's health was not good originally. If she really had an operation, I'm afraid she won't be able to walk. It's better to buy a wheelchair for safety. Kay is angry with his mother, but his love is also real. Otherwise, he wouldn't be willing to support her in old age even after I was indirectly killed by his mother. Looking at Kay's living back, a sneer escaped from the corner of my mouth. This time, I want to see how Grace ends up. Leo has sharp eyes. After Kay left, he opened the ward door conveniently. Grace, who was originally eating an apple, burst into tears as soon as she saw him. She suppressed her voice and cried, "Leo, why did you come so late?" Not to mention, a 50-year-old woman and a 60-year-old man hugging each other is really an eyesore. Especially, there is not only my Grace as a patient in the ward. The old man next to her was sleeping. As soon as he heard this commotion, he woke up directly. Grace was eager to tell her grievances and said regardless, "Leo, our son was almost gone. I'm so scared." The old man next to her almost had his eyeballs pop out. He was just about to praise Leo when suddenly his eyes met a pair of eyes outside the door. "Whoa, who is that?" Grace and Leo were startled by his exclamation, but when they turned around, they didn't see anyone. The two continued to discuss how to keep the child in Grace's belly. And I looked at Ivy, who laughed angrily and quietly curved my mouth. I once heard Grace say, Leo's biggest regret in his life is that he didn't have a son. So after Grace insisted that the doctor had revealed that she was pregnant with a son, Leo was filled with ecstasy. He walked around Grace several times and offered take the initiative to propose and say, "Grace, take good care of your pregnancy. Don't worry about all the expenses for the child. I'll pay for it all. When the child is born safely, I'll give you another 10,000 yuan. Grace touched her belly with a shy face and coquettishly said, "Leo, you know I don't want money. I just want to ask you one question. When will you divorce that woman and marry me?" Grace doesn't understand being in it, but I saw hesitation in Leo's eyes. Although his wife didn't give birth to a son for him, they have 2 daughters as a couple. And both daughters are already adults and working. They also take the initiative to give money to support the old couple every month. Coupled with Ivy's retirement pay, Leo's life is actually very comfortable now. If it comes to the point of divorce, it can be predicted that Leo may have to say goodbye to his comfortable and leisurely days. And my Grace is from the countryside. She has no ability. She relies on me and Kay to give her money for old age support. If they get together, I'm afraid they won't be able to support a delicate son. I predicted that Leo wouldn't divorce for Grace. As a result, he is even more vicious than I thought. Leo whispered a few words in Grace's ear. Grace then asked me to buy some fruit for her. I nodded and said yes. When I opened the cabinet to get my wallet, I took the opportunity to turn on the phone's recording function and hid the phone behind the cabinet. Half an hour later, Kay and I pushed the wheelchair in through the door. Leo had already left. The old man next door was pushed away for an examination. Grace opened her mouth and started wailing, "Kay, I can still get pregnant in my 50s. That is a gift from heaven. I beg you. Please let me give birth to this child, okay? Kay's face flashed instantly. He looked at me incredulously. Didn't you say you had persuaded her? I shrugged and spread my hands. Mom had agreed originally. I didn't expect her to change her mind so quickly. In fact, Grace never intended to abort the child. But the advice I gave her was to coax and agree to Kay first. When the pregnancy progresses and it becomes too late for an abortion, she can only keep the child. However, after Leo arrived, Grace instantly changed her mind. She was immersed in the so-called love and was completely deceived by Leo, an outsider. As for me and Kay, who should have been the people closest to her, now we seem like her enemies. Kay was extremely angry and refused through gritted teeth. Impossible. If you really give birth to this child, then don't blame me for not recognizing you as my mother. Grace having a child at an old age is already terrifying. What's even more terrifying is that the father of this child has a family. Once the news leaks out, it's not just a matter of losing face. Just say that Kay's hard-earned job with a stable position after years of studying might also be lost. People, once it comes to their own interests, are more awake than anyone else. Kay ignored Grace's wishes and found the attending doctor, saying that he wanted to make an appointment for the surgery on her behalf. Grace was so frightened that she lost 7 parts of her soul. Seeing that no one was speaking up for her, she simply took a quick step and ran to the window. She climbed onto the window and pointed at Kay and the doctor, yelling curses, "You heartless people. Don't even think about aborting my son. If you dare to lay a finger on me, believe it or not, I'll jump down from here right away." Having such a mother, Kay was so shocked that he trembled all over and couldn't say a word. The doctor standing next to him was also frightened by this scene, but he quickly reacted. "Auntie, don't move. For the appointment of the surgery, it requires your signature. Others can't make the decision." Grace was skeptical. "Really? You won't be deceiving me, will you?" The doctor almost swore an oath before coaxing Grace down from the window. After all this commotion, the whole building heard the gossip about Ward 23. Kay couldn't stand those people's gossiping eyes. He used the excuse that he had to go to work tomorrow and left me in the hospital to take care of Grace. I didn't refuse. Anyway, my daughter is being taken care of by my parents. I just take this opportunity to resolve Grace and Kay together. At night, after Grace fell asleep, I put on headphones and opened the phone recording from the afternoon. Soon, Leo's wretched voice came out. "Grace, I know you always wanted me to divorce the one at home. But given our current economic situation and physical condition, Shabal will suffer if he is born. In my opinion, it's better to put the child under the name of your son and daughter-in-law and say it's theirs." Grace was very reluctant. "No way. I never liked Sunny. How can I allow my son to call her mother?" Leo continued to persuade. "Grace, isn't the house you live in now registered under your daughter-in-law's name? I was thinking that she gave birth to a girl. When our son is under her name, ask her to transfer the house. After you and I pass away, the child won't be without support." Hearing them plotting about the house, I was so angry that I trembled all over. When Kay and I got married, Grace said she had no money, so the house we live in was bought in full by my parents before marriage for me, so that I would have a place to live. And when I had a massive hemorrhage unexpectedly after giving birth to Candy, the doctor said I could never have children again. Leo's wishful thinking is really good. And this fool Grace was repeatedly fooled by him and actually agreed immediately. I think that today she threatened to jump off a building to force Kay to keep the child. The next step should be to persuade Kay to let him agree to put the child under our names as a couple. As for my opinion, it has never been within Grace's consideration. She looks down on me but still wants to scheme against me. How ridiculous! In my previous life, I was stabbed to death by Ivy, who mistakenly thought I was Leo's mistress. Although I hate her, I hate that pair of dogs, Grace and Leo, even more. I suppressed my hatred and turned off the recording. Then I started searching for Leo's building and room number in the owner group. Before long, I found Ivy's WeChat. After the friend request was approved, I sent her a photo of Grace and Leo embracing in the ward. After the photo was sent successfully, the dialog box on that side kept showing typing. I waited patiently. A few minutes later, a line of words appeared. What do you want? In just a few words, I could still sense the murderous intent filling the screen. For Ivy, a woman who has been reasonable and abides by the rules all her life, the blow of her husband's infidelity is a bit too much for her. If she impulsively kills someone, the final outcome is still death. Both she and I ended up with a tragic ending because of unworthy people. So this time, I want to give her a hand. It's not clear to say a few words on WeChat, and it's also easy to leave evidence and be held by the handle. So I made an appointment with Ivy to meet and talk in detail. At noon the next day, Leo came to deliver food to Grace. I tactfully left them space. Before leaving, I still hid a phone recording. Leo was in the hospital, and I made an appointment with Ivy in a private room of a tea house next to the hospital. After not seeing her for just a few days, there were several new wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, and the hair at her temples had also turned white. She sat on the chair looking completely dejected. After brewing for a long time, she finally mustered up the courage to ask me, when did they start having an affair? I shook my head at her and only said that I had discovered it recently. It's been more than 3 months since I found out. As for when Grace and Leo started having an affair, I really don't know. Ivy's breathing paused. Forget it. Asking these questions now is meaningless. This pair of immoral people must pay the price for this. Her eyes were filled with surging hatred, as if she wanted to rush over and tear them apart immediately. I slowly said, Ivy, if you really kill someone, have you thought about your 2 daughters? Having a cheating father is already very embarrassing. If there is also a mother who is a murderer, how will they spend the rest of their lives? I am not a saint. On the day I was reborn, I also thought about directly dealing with Grace. But my daughter is only 5 years old this year. If there is a mother who is a murderer, her life will really be ruined. Putting myself in her shoes, I don't want to see those 2 innocent girls being criticized. As for Grace and Leo, they will have the retribution they deserve. After I played the recording, Ivy's gaze at me changed from guarded scrutiny to trust. Only at this moment did she dare to be sure that I had the same goal and enemy as her. Ivy told me that the 18th of next month is Leo's birthday. At that time, their daughters and relatives at home will come over. Revealing the truth on this day is the best. After the plan was set, we decided to act separately. I went back to continue taking care of Grace, and by the way, whispered some words about binding Leo with children in her ear. Ivy started preparing for next month's birthday banquet on her side. In order to ensure that it can deal a heavy blow to Leo, Grace stayed in the hospital for a few days. The doctor said she could go home. On the day of discharge, she was sitting in a wheelchair and kept complaining to me, Kay is busy with work, so it's fine. But you don't go to work and still come so late. If I really starve to death, I'll see how you explain to Leo and my son. I looked down at her somewhat pale head and turned the wheelchair in the direction of the center of the community. From a long distance away, I saw Ivy wearing bright new clothes. She was surrounded by several women. Everyone praised her clothes for being beautiful and making her look younger. Ivy was modest in her words, but the smile on her face never disappeared. Hey, this is a cheesy festival gift from our Leo. I thought it was too expensive at first, but he insisted on buying it for me and said that I deserved the best. At our age, what kind of romance is there? I told him he is not ashamed. With every word Ivy said, Grace's face darkened a bit. She suddenly stood up and rushed towards the building in 3 steps and 2 strides. Unnoticed by anyone, Ivy and I silently exchanged glances. According to Grace's temperament, She should go back and quarrel with Leo at this moment. Sure enough, as soon as I entered the door, I heard Grace's hysterical crying and roaring. Leo, you liar. You said you would mention the words to Ivy as soon as you got home. Let me ask you, have you really done it? The person on the other end of the phone was silent for a moment. Just as he was about to deceive her again, Grace was stimulated and became unusually clear-headed. She wiped away her tears and threatened, I'll give you half a month. If you don't mention the words, then I'll make the decision for you. When Grace says help, most likely it means going to confront Ivy. She is bold enough, but Leo doesn't have that courage. He has cheated before, but never had a child from an affair. Leo is torn between having a son to carry on his lineage and not wanting to give up his current unrestrained life. Little does he know that while he is torn and troubled, Ivy has already obtained all the evidence she needs. Earlier, she really wanted to die together with Leo's cheating partner. But reality forces her to restrain her emotions and plan for her and her two daughters' future. In an adult's marriage, in the end, it all depends on conscience. Leo's conscience has been eaten by dogs. So I taught her to seize the bread first. Since Grace came home, Kay has started a work pattern of leaving early and returning late. Throwing his troublesome mother to me, he really can do it. Grace is anxiously waiting for Leo's news every day. Ivy and I are also anxiously waiting for the 18th to arrive. 2 days before Leo's birthday, Grace received an invitation from Ivy. In the living room, Ivy had a happy smile on her face. Grace, I'm mainly here to deliver an invitation to you today. Leo is 62 years old on his birthday. I specially invited his dance team partners to give him a birthday surprise. Please don't decline. Grace was calm on the surface, but the vinegar jar in her heart had already overturned. She took the invitation and said she would definitely go. Not long after Ivy left, she smashed the white porcelain teacup placed at home to pieces. Oh, Ivy, this coquettish woman, actually showed off in front of me. Invite me to the birthday party. Okay, then I'll have sex with Leo in their house. I'll piss her off. Although I knew early on that Grace had no bottom line. But when I heard her say this, I was still shocked and got goosebumps all over. Kay didn't come home until 12 o'clock at night again. Looking at his slightly tired expression, I still told him what Grace said in the afternoon. Kay looked embarrassed, and in the end he was unable to complain. He waved his hand at me. In other people's families, men are responsible for the outside and women are responsible for the inside. I'm very busy at work. On his birthday, you go with her and make sure she doesn't cause trouble. After saying that, Kay took his pajamas and went to take a bath, leaving me looking at his back, full of resentment. Men are such things. Usually they are invisible. When you really encounter a problem, he will only escape, and still beautify it as men being responsible for the outside. In my opinion, it's all bullshit. Fortunately, I never intended to involve him in the first place. I told him about this matter in advance only to clear myself. In the twinkling of an eye, it was Leo's birthday. Ivy made an excuse with her daughters to ask Leo to go out and buy groceries. In fact, she was planning to give him a surprise. So everyone hid in the compartment on the second floor. As soon as the key outside the door clicked, as soon as Leo opened the door, Grace, who had been hiding in the stairwell earlier, darted in. She walked around downstairs and asked warily, "Where are your family members?" Leo followed behind her. After confirming that there was no one in the house, his suspended heart was set at ease. They should have gone to the hotel to prepare a surprise for me. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? Grace was instantly ignited by his question. Leo, do you have a conscience? The child in my belly is your son. I have come today to ask you for an explanation. When will you divorce and marry me? Hearing this, everyone upstairs looked at each other in dismay. The atmosphere suddenly froze. Ivy put up her index finger and signaled everyone not to make a sound. She squatted down slowly, and then saw a scene that made her extremely disgusted. Leo refused to give in. Grace was anxious and remembered their harmonious past. So she simply lifted her skirt, pushed Leo onto the sofa, and then pressed herself on top of him. Moaning sounds rang out. Ivy could no longer control herself and vomited on the spot. Leo's two daughters rushed downstairs and each slapped Grace on the face. Grace was stunned. When she reacted, she was about to struggle, but she was still sitting on Leo. With this movement, a crisp sound of fracture rang out from under her. Later, the scene was in chaos. During the pushing and shoving, Grace somehow fell to the ground with a thud. She was an older pregnant woman and her pregnancy condition was not good. After this commotion, the child was gone before reaching the hospital. As for Leo, it is said that his hip bone was broken and his private parts also suffered a broken fate. The paramedics ran up and down the stairs. Neighbors who smelled the gossip gathered downstairs and discussed among themselves. Then they watched the ambulance leave. Given that the impact of the scene just now was really too great, Leo's relatives were too embarrassed to persuade. After Leo's eldest daughter sent the relatives away, she threw the prepared cake and gifts into the trash can. She said sternly, "Mom, divorce him." Leo's younger daughter was a person of action. In such a short time, she had already contacted a divorce lawyer. Ivy looked at her two caring daughters and was extremely glad that she had listened to my advice. She sent the video of the scene to Kay's cell phone, along with a few insults without using dirty words. When Kay took the video and went home to question me, he found that all the things belonging to me and my daughter at home had been moved out. He was very panicked and called to ask where I was. Looking at my already asleep daughter, I said coldly, "Your mother did such a thing. I have no face to live with you anymore." "Kay, I want a divorce." Kay was stunned. "Sunny, we are all family. Can't we discuss things properly?" As soon as the word discuss came out, I burst out laughing. In my previous life, after I was stabbed to death by Ivy, Kay did not clarify or avenge for me. Instead, he let me die with the reputation of a mistress. When Grace used her trump card of hanging herself, he easily forgave her. Even taking my compensation money, he took Grace back to his hometown to live. He never cared about our husband-wife relationship. Now he wants to use the name of family to kidnap me. It's simply absurd. But I didn't directly refuse. I said, "Kay, as long as you cut off the relationship with your mother, I can also not divorce you." I drew out the pie. But I know that Kay can't get rid of his mother. There is no possibility in this lifetime. Although I have returned to my parents' home, I still keep an eye on Grace's side. I heard that after she knew the child was gone, she cried and made a fuss, saying that she wanted to settle scores with Ivy and her daughters. But no one is willing to take care of her lawsuit. When Leo was still recuperating in the hospital, he received the divorce judgment delivered by a lawyer. His wife was gone, his daughters didn't care about him anymore. He had no money in his card. The doctor stopped his medicine and told him to go home and recuperate. He was so angry that he sneaked into Grace's ward in the middle of the night.
There is a good saying that as a man sows, so he shall reap. Cause and effect.
Suddenly, he heard two screams. He rushed out of the ward and saw Grace and Leo both fall down the stairs. Leo's life was not tough enough and he lost his breath on the spot. Grace was a bit better than him. After being rescued, she could still breathe through her nose, but her body couldn't move. She was paralyzed in bed, with saliva constantly flowing out of her mouth. Kay called me every few days begging me to go back. I asked him to sign the divorce agreement but he refused. Then I could only go through legal procedures. The house I bought before marriage was handed over to the intermediary. Within a month, the house had a new owner. I said that the deadbeat at home refused to move out and it might be difficult to take possession of the house. I was willing to reduce 20,000 yuan. The other party was also satisfied. They gave the money readily and said they had their own ways to deal with it. The day after the house transaction was successful, Kay was devastated. He called me hundreds of times and sent countless messages, but I didn't reply to any of them. For my daughter Candy, I didn't report to Kay's work unit. Mainly, I was afraid that he would be cornered and act recklessly. I handed over the cursed messages to the lawyer. She was delighted that there were a few more evidences of a broken relationship, but she also told me the current situation. She said that my marriage with Kay was different from Ivy's. There was conclusive evidence of the man's infidelity there, so the lawsuit for divorce could win. As for me and Kay, the biggest problem at present is just me, Grace. There is no major problem between us, the husband and wife. Even if the woman has hundreds of ways to prove the breakdown of marriage, during the trial, she is always asked to mediate again. The so-called cooling off period for divorce is just an opportunity for those men who make mistakes to increase their fault tolerance rate. Perhaps after calming down, the woman no longer wants a divorce. She asked me to be prepared for a protracted war. I nodded. I thought it would take a year or two, but unexpectedly, Kay would take the initiative to find me to sign for divorce. At the gate of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Kay was holding a woman dressed luxuriously. Looking at me, his eyes were full of relief. Sunny, if you hadn't left on your own initiative, how could I find such a perfect wife like Moon? I still have to thank you. I divorced Kay in the morning, and he got a marriage certificate with that woman named Moon in the afternoon. On the third day after divorce, Kay called me again. His voice was full of horror. Sunny, I was cheated. That woman is a gambler. She owes a lot of money. Now I am being chased for debts. Can you lend me some money? Gambler. Borrow money. I hung up the phone extremely indifferently and then neatly cancelled my phone number. After moving away from this city with my parents, I never inquired about the news of Kay and Grace again. Their lives and deaths have nothing to do with me anymore. There is a good saying that as a man sows, so he shall reap. Cause and effect cycle, retribution is inevitable. It is inevitable. It is inevitable. It is inevitable. It is inevitable.